My name's Sonia Sodha. I'm Chief Leader Writer at the Observer newspaper in the UK and also an Observer and Guardian columnist. I am your host for this evening, and we have a fantastic panel of politicians from across the EU to talk about what sort of world we want to live in after the pandemic, particularly from the perspective of the next generation. And I can tell you that sitting here from the UK, this feels like an incredibly timely discussion. There's been huge criticism of our government because it seems that the welfare of children and young people have really fallen to the bottom of this debate, and things like school reopening, funding for children over the summer holidays, that really seems to be at the bottom of the priority list, compared to things like opening shops and non-essential retail. So certainly in the UK, there is very little thinking going into how we protect children and young people who, after all, from a long-term perspective, stand to lose the most from this pandemic in terms of their lifetime opportunities, what we do to ameliorate that. So I'm really interested to be hearing about experiences from across the EU from our panel of speakers. And I also know that lots of you have been discussing the document that's been put out today with the 6 possible scenarios. So hopefully some of that will inform our thinking as well. So we have a panel of 4 politicians, 4 excellent speakers from across the EU. They're all going to give us a lightning pitch, no more than 5 minutes, which will set out what their top 2 or 3 priorities would be for the next generation and this pandemic if they were leading their country tomorrow, which I'm sure we all hope will happen, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. So I will introduce our 4 speakers first of all, and then I'm going to hand it over to them. So first of all, we have Magdalena Biejat, who is a member of the Polish Parliament, and she's also a sociologist and a translator of Spanish literature. Second up, we have Richard Kaniewski, who is a political advisor at the Saxon State Ministry of Economic Affairs, Labour and Transport. Thirdly, we will come to Ophélie Omnes, who's a lawyer and president of the French branch of JEF, and she's also a chair of Task Force on Diversity and Empowerment. So she will bring us views from France. And last but not least, we have Katharina Schulze, who is a German politician of the Alliance 90 and the Greens. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Magdalena to set out her lightning pitch for us. And then after we've heard from all 4 of our speakers, we will come to some questions from the audience. So Magdalena, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such a great pleasure to be here with all you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Polish perspective and how we experienced the coronavirus and what had it brought to the conversation in Poland. The coronavirus showed us, in my opinion, that the left was right, that the crisis, that in times of crisis we need strong societies that are able to take care of the weak and to take care of all their members, regardless their social or economic status. We desperately need all those solutions that can help us to build this kind of society. Unfortunately, in Poland, which is the country of the solidarity movement that started here, forgot about the meaning of solidarity very quickly. In the 90s, we forgot what solidarity means. We jumped into the free market and the logic of capitalism. And now, after 30 years, more than 30 years, we're seeing that it's failed us. I'm sure you all seen it in your countries, how the labor market was affected by the coronavirus crisis, how the praised idea of the flexible labor market, of a labor market that is open to challenges of the new global and IT high-tech world, is not actually what is needed when the crisis comes. Because in Poland, we've seen very clearly that we've had 2 or even more types of people who are in the labor force. Those who are privileged, who have their regular status, who can can rely on the welfare, and those who are excluded of any kind of help from the state. Another problem was, of course, the public health system. It's not America, of course. We all pay our taxes and we get the public health system more or less. But it has showed us how defunded it's been, how we forgot how important the public services are in this particular sector. It has been also, it has shown as well how the market and the capitalist logic has came crawling into that part of our system, and how and it's really interesting to see how actually the services that we need the most basic ones, when you need respirators, when you need good ER systems, are failing us, because those are the cheapest ones that the middle class and the higher class could buy on the private market. So we hadn't been investing in that particular element of the health system. And another problem that I wanted to point out was, you mentioned it a little bit before, was the access to education. We had to switch to the education in the internet, to the new tools, and our teachers and our pupils were not ready for that. And we've had a lot of problems with students and pupils disappearing from the system. And that's a very important problem that we had to address in somehow, and our government has failed to address it. So after all that, what is that what seems most important to me? What is what I would aim for? I think that what we should look for is a democracy that is based on solidarity, that puts the person, the member of the community in the center. We have to get back from the logic of the free market, of capitalism, and to start to create a new system that is based on solidarity and transparency. Because what we can see as well in Poland, and it has been sadly loud, it has been very, what do you say, you've been very present in the media in the last days because of the sudden, well, not so sudden, but the switch of the Polish government and the Polish right-wing parties into this homophobic, nationalistic propaganda. So this is a problem we're facing right now, that the people are losing faith in democracy and democratic institutions right now, in that they can actually rely on the public services and public goods. So what we need is to create good public institutions, especially a labor market that is answering to the new challenges of the Uberization of the labor market, of the globalization, but at the same time gives agency to the people, gives agency to those who are the workforce right now. And that so this is one part of the challenges I'm seeing right now. And the other one, of course, is to focus on those, let's say, the weak members of the community, the children, the women, the people who are let's see not as privileged socially or economically speaking. If we start building our thinking more than even institutions, but thinking and logic of politics around them, we could maybe turn it all around. Maybe we could provide and present a vision of a state, a vision of society, a vision of environment as well, that could really be a vision that is appealing and that is somehow, and that actually can bring us to a better future than the one that is right now proposed to us by the right wing and the center liberal politicians. So that will be it. I hope I didn't excess the 5 minutes too much.
No, that was great. Thanks, Magdalena. Just one question for you. So you talked about the kind of challenges, I suppose, in combating populist, nationalistic agendas. That's obviously something you've seen in Poland. It's something we're seeing play out in the US with Trump, in Brazil with Bolsonaro, to some extent here in the UK with Boris Johnson. What lessons do you think there are from Poland? How is the left seeking to counter right populism in Poland as this pandemic unfolds?
Well, we are right now in the middle of a presidential election, so it's been really heat up for a couple of months right now. And we have the privilege to have an openly gay candidate as a left parties. So it's been quite interesting how you can how we've been creating a new space for the conversation about human rights right now, and we've been using the propaganda of the right-wing populists to turn it around and to start talking about people. As I said, we have to start talking about people, and we have to put them and their stories in the center of how we want to talk about the future, of how we want to talk about the society. And in long-term speaking, what we are doing, because the Polish right wing and the Polish populists are very much stressing the need of let's say, the little stabilization, economically speaking. So they are creating a welfare that is very basic, that it's really concentrated on social transfers to people who need it, be it families or seniors, and so on. So as a left-wing parties, what we are saying is that it's not enough. But it's not enough in terms of the amount of money that you can transfer to people, but it's not enough in terms of systemic changes and creating a system of public services that can actually be a safe, how to call it? I like the word, sorry. I've been a little rusty because of the coronavirus pandemic. But that can actually create a system that can protect us in times of crisis, that can be a little less dependent of the fluctuations of the markets than the simple transfers, money transfers that the populists are offering us today.
Great, thank you so much for that. Richard, I'm now going to come to you for your lightning pitch.
Yeah, thank you. I thought about what to say, and as often as my screen froze right now, I think the hugest challenge in Germany is digitalization, and that's for sure also a topic we had to discuss, or we had to deal with in the whole Corona crisis. I think, as Magdalena said, it's not so different in Germany. We saw a very problematic situation for people who don't have so much money, who don't gain so much money, and I think this is a really huge problem, because for me as an advisor in a ministry, the Corona crisis was no real crisis for me. I try to explain it personally because maybe it's you understand better what I mean, because I don't have to think about my job after the Corona crisis. I know I'm there, I know I do my work, and I know I have my job also in 2021. But when I'm talking with people in the ministry and also as a voluntary politician, they're thinking hardly about how to deal with the money, with the less money they have, how to deal with the whole situation, and do they have their jobs after the crisis? And for me, that's one very important question, because I think you can see that we have in Germany some.
I think we might have just had Richard freeze there. Richard, are you there?
In there,
oh, yes.
We have to give. I'm back. It's digitalization. Yeah, I saw the frozen screen. Sorry. We need more, from my point of view. We need more power for trade unions to care about the workers. I think we need a higher minimum wage. I think it's too low in Germany. I think people also in the crisis right now had really big problems with their lower incomes. And we also have to think about to finance our welfare state. We have also to think about other taxes, so maximum tax reform, and also more taxes for the rich. Because from my point of view, as someone of the Social Democratic Party and as someone who lives or feels in the left movement, I think the stronger should care more for them, for those who don't have so much. And I think it's very important to deal with these issues as soon as possible. What we see, why the crisis in another dimension is the situation in development countries, and that's also one point I had to think about very often the last days, because I know that we will, in the so-called Western world, more or less deal good with this crisis. But when I look at the so-called development countries, we are facing a new problem, or another problem right now with this Corona crisis, and I think we have to change our we have to change, but we need a new, from my point of view, a new development aid deal. So we shouldn't be happy when we build some water stations in Africa. We should help people develop economy and help them also strengthen their societies. And to be honest, often when I'm walking through the city and I see the people consuming their goods, I think they don't care about other people and the situation in the rest of the world. And I don't want to see any more people die for my luxury and for my wealth. And we are responsible as Western world and as Europeans to do something, not only talk about, doing something in this situation. And from that point, I come to the third thing. I think it's almost the same to Magdalena. I think we should try to unify our societies again, because the Corona crisis showed that so many people aren't convinced anymore about democracy, and also democratic leaders and politicians and parties. And I think it's easy to convince them again, but also parties and politicians have to be open-minded to change these situations. And I think that no question in which part of the democratic political spectrum you are. But I think politics needs a new openness, more transparency. We have some very interesting discussions yesterday and today in German politics about transparency in political acting. And I think we should be brave and communicate with people, because all the benefits we have as politicians don't fall from heaven. We are doing this for the people, and I think sometimes all of us, the younger generation, a bit less, but we are sometimes very, very wide away from the people who voted for us. And sometimes I'm not surprised that so many people say, okay, politics isn't that what I expect anymore. So to come to the conclusion, I think we can use this crisis to strengthen the picture of our democracy when we try to get back to the core of politics, especially in progressive and left and middle wing parties. So working for the people and not only for economy, and showing that we are caring about them. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Richard. Next, I'm going to come to Ophélie for her lightning pitch.
Hi, it was really interesting to listen to what has been said before by Magdalena, Richard, and thank you very much for the transition. Because when I had to think about what I would do if I were to become head of state tomorrow, I thought about things that I thought were heavier in the French context, maybe. And then hearing about what's going on in Poland or in Germany, I realized, even though I'm not entirely surprised, that we sort of share the same concerns and the same the same answers, so to say. So first of all, I thought that, well, there is like a prerequisite. There is something that even before proposing any action or any plan that we should do next, is for our political class to acknowledge that they don't really know what's going on, and neither do we. But I mean, like, this humility would be the first tool to break this sort of distance that has built itself between decision makers and people. And I think that this specifically showed when there were measures that were taken at the top of the state, and they were impacting people who work on the ground and so often feel like the political class is disconnected from their reality. So I think that we're facing huge crisis that is going to have and is already having major consequences. And I think the very first thing for our political class to do is to acknowledge that we need to rebuild things together, and the idea of presenting themselves as being too self-confident is really something that they should avoid, and really something that like we as civil society should take care of, that it's not happening. Because I think it's important, humility first of all. So having this mindset of our leaders needs to be humble and ready to do whatever it takes to change what we need to change. First of all, with no surprise, I would set some of the priorities in Europe, because the only way out of this crisis is together. There is no other way out. That we cannot afford to try and relaunch our countries and our societies alone. Like, we just can't. We can't afford it, and we also won't manage to do it. So I think it's just waste of time just to try to do it. And I would really like to see from our European leaders dialogue. And I mean, I'm not saying it's not there yet, or not. I'm just saying this should be emphasized, that we should more think about how we can make things work together instead of trying to shine as one particular state's little star, because it really is about the results. It doesn't really matter how we do it now. It matters that we deliver for the people. And I think that one very particular and specific way to do it is to put some more efforts into making Europe work, into having a political agenda, a Europe political agenda that would be bold, and that would actually, in the end, show the people that we can deliver to protect them within the union, but also with regards to the outside. So that would be my first point. My second point would be, we need to reconnect with the citizens. As I said, there is this distance, and Richard was mentioning it when it comes to Germany, but it is highly the case in France as well. And you might have heard all the social strikes that have hit the country over the past 2 years. And I mean, there was this poll all around Europe during the crisis about how much people were satisfied with the measures that their government took. And even though from an outside perspective, the French government can be considered as having sort of performed when it comes to the measures that were taken, the French remained in the most unsatisfied people when it came to the government, even more than the people in the UK, bearing in mind that Boris Johnson was not exactly an example of leadership. So one may argue that, the French are never satisfied, which is also kind of true. But jokes aside, I think it does say a lot about how people and how the society in general generally feel when it comes to the political class, when it comes to the leaders and the government. And I think that as long as people think or feel that they're unheard, the gap's going to go wider and wider. And as it was mentioned before, if that gap gets wider and wider, we end up endangering our own democracy, because then people don't believe in politics anymore. They don't believe that you can actually achieve change through that. They don't believe that you can actually make their life better. And why should they trust you when you actually can't deliver? So I think it's important that we reclaim talking to people. It's not only populists that can actually talk to real people. progressives can also do that. But maybe we've forgotten how to do it, or maybe we need to find new ways to do it. And I think it's important that we also question our institutions if that's needed, especially with everything that's going on now, with whether we would need to question the institutions, how we want to ensure that things are fair to all the citizens, and how we sort of need to face the truth and to acknowledge that maybe there are some things that aren't fair, and what can we do to change it. And I think that this dialogue culture that maybe we've lost, at least in France, is something to be restored. And my last point is that we definitely need to rethink our economic system. I mean, we need to think again about how we value jobs. For instance, they were like the French nurses were on strike today because they are negotiating with the government at the moment about their working condition. And yeah, how normal, because those people, together with the cashier in the supermarkets, together with other people that didn't have much value when it comes to money before, we actually realized that those people like allowed the country and to a wider sense allowed the continent to survive. So how do we rethink the economic system, valuing work that is not only serving private interest or just following capitalist approach of making money? And how do we actually manage to value people in health sector, in education, in all those jobs that are actually the essential ones? And to conclude, we also need to rethink the economic systems when it comes to environment, because we see with all the relaunch plans that of course, there is some productivity that we need to regain in order to kick the economy again, for people not to lose too many jobs. But we also need to rethink the way we want to help the economy. And before the crisis, it looked impossible for political leaders to take actions, and concrete and drastic actions, to protect the environment. And all was lacking was political will. And with all the lockdowns we've seen all around the world, we actually saw that whenever politicians want to achieve something, it is possible. So let's make it happen when it comes to environment as well.
Great, thank you. Just one question for you. So you talked about the importance of revaluing work and revaluing jobs, and we've had a similar debate here in the UK. I mean, our care workers, for example, lots of them are minimum wage jobs, and yet these are people going out risking their lives every day to care for older people. But I guess the question is, how do we revalue jobs? How do we get people to value a job like care work the same as, or more perhaps, than say, being a banker or a lawyer? What are the levers that you see in France to sort of make that happen?
It's actually a difficult question because I think if we had the simple solution, we would at least try to implement it, which is far from being the case. I think to begin with, something that we can easily do, but that's going to take a very long time to sink in, is to revalue those jobs in terms of the image we have out of it. You mentioned the lawyers and the bankers, and these are the professions that are looked upon not only because they make a lot of money, like that as well, although they don't all do, but still. But it's because these are professions that are considered to be respected, respectful, that needs to be looked up to. And I honestly don't understand why we should look up to a lawyer more than you should do at a nurse, for instance. Like, far from it. So I think it's also about how we teach our children and how we educate them into the society we want to have. So I think that, first of all, it's really like how you picture those jobs and what moral value, so to say, you put into it. And then, of course, there's the question of how much money they earned. Here in France, for instance, the nurses and the people in hospitals, what they wanted are like a raise of like a few €100. And I mean, when you think of it, yes, they don't make money, so we need to find the money. But at the same time, if those people are not there, there is no people making money anymore, because those people, they save our lives. So I think that it's also about revaluing this through where does the money go in the economy? You know, like it cannot only go to what's profitable. We also need to think about an entire new system in which it would also make sense for the care workers, for instance.
Great, thank you so much. Katharina, I'm now going to come to you, but before I do, just to let those of you know who are watching, there's a facility for you to submit questions for all four of our speakers, and I'd really encourage you to do that, as Katharina is our last speaker. So Katharina, now for your lightning pitch.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, and servus, that's the Bavarian hello to all of you. I am very honored that I get the chance to share my vision of a good tomorrow with you today, and I think I will dive right in with concrete ideas what I would change on the federal state level, because that's my place where I'm working as a member of parliament. So you asked me what would be my first action as a prime minister. And let me start, I'm really happy with this question, because in my view, the wonderful state of Bavaria needs strongly a green female MP to drive forward the change. So I can strongly underline a lot what already was said. And my guideline would be the following. I want to make our society more sustainable. I think we need to strengthen our democracy, and of course, we all need to be feminists. And starting with the first, fight every crisis is the motto. And during the Corona crisis, the climate crisis is not sleeping. So it's our responsibility now to protect our livelihood. And that's why we need a strong priority on sustainability in the next years to make our politics appropriate for next generations. And for that, I would introduce a strong climate protection law in Bavaria. We don't have that at the moment. And these strong climate protection law will include binding, and that's important, binding CO2 targets to reduce emissions to under 2 tons per citizen annually by 2050. And if we're having this law, we would build wind turbines and solar panels, and we would work on the mobility and agrarian turnaround. And this is really important, we would make a socio-ecological transformation of our economy. At the moment, during the Corona crisis, we are taking a lot of money in Germany in our hands to help, and I think that's good. But it's also important to take the money for socio-ecological transformation of the economy, because we are having a lot of challenges on a parallel level. So we have to fight every crisis and also always having the climate change in our mind. The next big thing is that the next action, I would transform Bavaria in the federal state of equal rights and opportunities for women. And always when I'm saying that, I hear in my ears the Conservative Party in my home state gasping, and I like that, because that's something which we really have to do. Shaping the future also means ensuring that our state's politics keep pace with the diversity that has long been lived in our country. And for that, it's clear for me, half of the power, half of the resources to the women, and of course, equal pay for equal work. And we're seeing at the Corona crisis at the moment that especially women are fighting at the front line against the Corona crisis. Some of you already said it, homeschooling and home office combined, and then working mostly in care jobs. And what is happening? At 7 p.m., some people are clapping at the balcony, and then they're going back to normal. I think that's not enough. We really have to change the conditions. We have to pay them enough to live. We have to work for better working conditions, and all the other points which were already pointed out. And then on my third agenda, as a Prime Minister of Bavaria, I like saying that, I would strengthen our democracy. And for that, I think we need a firework of action. So I would make the fight against right-wing terrorism, against racism, against anti-Semitism, and the fight for our democracy a top priority in my cabinet. I think it's important that you really have that at a top priority, so that you can put all your policy ideas under this whole under this big aim. So on the one hand, I would, for example, boost the investigative pressure on the right-wing scene. I'm a green security politician, so I know that repression alone will not help. We also need more education in democracy. We need more education in media competence in the schools and especially outside of the school. I think we need a law against discrimination in Bavaria, and we really have to live diversity, not only talk about it, we have to live. And this is an old political idea, which since I'm doing politics is really important for me. I would definitely have the voting age 16 in Bavaria, because I strongly believe young people are more affected by political decisions than others, and it's not okay to exclude them anymore from the political process. They must have a say in their future, so voting age 16 right away. Okay, that's, I mean, I only have 5 minutes, but that's a couple of things which I would do. I think we have to live and work more sustainable. We need to defend our democracy, and we all need to be feminists. And if you're talking about this, we also need leaders who drive this change with smart visions in a time of uncertainty. Because yes, it's a time of uncertainty. It's now time to move forward, not always thinking in old ways. Oh, but we did it like this the last 20 years. Yeah, but now it's a new time, so we need to do something else. So we need to act, in my point of view, more progressive to cause also disruptive change. We need to work together. The European perspective was already mentioned by you 100%. That's clear. We're living in a global world. We have to work together. And if you can't do it on the European level, how shall we do it on a global level? So that's really the first thing to do. And this is something which I would describe as more empathy and more solidarity. I think we have to show solidarity to each other while tackling the challenges, because we are all tackling them. And we are not always having the right idea and solution subito and on the right point. So we have to hear more, listen more, work stronger together in solidarity. And I think this is important for people who are working in politics, but also in civil society. So if I have to sum it up, I would say more courage, less fear. And I think this is a very good guideline for what lies ahead of us.
Great, thank you, Katharina. Well, I like your manifesto. So if you win, I'm moving to Bavaria. But there's a lot. Thank you. There's so much to pick up on what you said. I think I'm going to pick up on what you said about climate and environment. So you talked about things like wind turbines and solar panels, and some people might say, well, that's the easy stuff. The hard stuff is getting people to fly less, to eat less meat, to travel less. So what would a Green government in Bavaria do about that? Would you, for example, increase green taxes, or would you even go so far as to ration flying, say, and ration meat eating? What are your ideas around that?
I'm a strong believer that we don't need better people, we need better politics, you know? I think you have to show people that you can easily come from A to B with the train, for example, that you don't have to fly inside of Germany. And that's the job of politicians, to give more money to the train, to build more train lines, that people can ride a train instead of taking the flight from Munich to Hamburg or to Berlin. And the same is with the important topic of eating meat or eating not meat. Wouldn't it be better if we just get a turnaround in our agriculture system? And wouldn't it be also good if we're really also going into education from the beginning on how agriculture is working, how our products are going to be produced, etc. So I'm a really strong believer if politics are putting the right guidelines, we can have the change. And I think that's also our job to do. You know, I don't like if we're always saying, okay, now we're giving everything to the people and you have to know which product it is and where it's from and how you are coming from A to B. I mean, some people don't have time for this. They just need to buy food and they want to know that it's good food and no animal is harmed, etc. So it's the job of politicians to make the right, how you say, the right guidelines for a sustainable lifestyle. And that's what we have to do.
Great, thank you so much. So we're going to move to some discussion now, and I want to pick up on some of the themes that all four of you have talked about, and that's what's coming through in some of our questions as well. But first of all, I really wanted to focus on this issue of gender, because I think right across Europe, certainly here in the UK, we've got data that shows that it's women who are paring down their working hours to do more homeschooling, who are doing more domestic labour. So there's a real worry, I think, that this crisis has a permanent impact on women in the workplace the longer the pandemic goes on. Do any of the four of you have concrete ideas for how we address that and how we make sure that this pandemic doesn't more negatively impact on women in the years to come? Raise your hand if you'd like to say anything, but any of the four of you would like to say anything about that. Come on, someone's got to. Yeah, go for it, Katharina.
Thank you for addressing this topic, because that's something which makes me really, really angry. That it looks like that women and children are the losers of this pandemic. In Germany, we had a really crazy debate about should we allow soccer games again? And while we are having this debate, the playgrounds for kids in Bavaria were still closed. You know, that's for me like that was just crazy for me, because it should be the other way around. A good Bavarian government, sorry, I'm not just having my Bavarian hat on, but that's where I'm from, should think about how can we help parents, women, children surviving this pandemic. How can we get a kindergarten place for everybody and having a look for that the pandemic is not spreading even more? How can we pay parents, we say a Corona Elterngeld. I don't know what Elterngeld is in English. Maybe somebody can help me. But that parents get paid during the time where they can't work because they have to take care of the children. That would be a concrete idea how we could help these parents, and mostly, as you said, that there are women, because they have to shoulder the different tasks simultaneously.
Thanks so much. In the UK, we call it maternity and paternity pay, just for if that's helpful in the future. Does any of the other three of you want to say anything about gender? And perfect. Going over to Ophélie.
I think there's also some rules. I mean, I kind of like rules as a lawyer, so like forgive me about that. But I think there are rules to be implemented in the workplaces. I think that when it comes to labor law, our system is not strong enough and far from being strong enough. And yes, we've implemented a few directives from the EU about anti-discrimination and equal pay rights and all that. But I do think that we can also secure the system a bit more. And for instance, we can try to, I think it's also, here again, it's also about building a culture that, you know, when you have to get rid of someone, it doesn't have to be the woman first, or when you have to empower people or to keep the strong jobs, you might as well want to bet on the women. And into having some more rules about equality and equal representation at work. I think you get into the virtuous circle and you get out of the vicious circle, because I feel like what you were referring to was sort of the initiation of the vicious circle. Like they need to work a lot and they need to take care of the kids, and they need to hold it together, and so they're most likely to drop their jobs to take care of the kids. Whereas if you think about agile working, and I mean, like, no one can ever argue that agile working is not possible anymore in some industries or some sectors. I do get that in some it's still difficult, but in most, well, they managed to do it during the crisis, right? I mean, here the Minister of Economy here in France still argues that you should keep your employees at home if that's possible. Well, if you should keep them at home, just make the work actually more flexible. Because if you have to work behind a computer, then probably you might adapt your working hours. And it doesn't necessarily matter if you cannot work from 2 to 4 because you have to look after the kids or something. But by the end of the day, if you manage to spread work differently between family time and work, it's going to be extremely helpful to the women, for instance. And if we make sure that this system that we started building during the crisis, because we had no choice, actually doesn't go away and we build up on that, I think it will be extremely helpful for the women and the development of tomorrow's workplace.
Great, thanks so much. Coming to you. Great, thank you. There we go. Magdalena, to you.
Okay, thank you. So when we talk about flexible jobs and the possibility to work from home, I'm always a little bit suspicious, because when we talk about, many times we talk about it in terms of women who have to take care of the children. So it's still the women that have to be the primary caregivers, and that's why we need their job to be flexible, because they have to go to school to pick the kids up and to drive them to football class or whatever. And so, also, anytime I hear about the flexible jobs, I also think about how flexible the pay will be, because we are still fighting with that gender pay gap that we have in Poland and all over the EU. So I think that the flexibility of the job as a response to the gender inequality is not a good focus. I would argue that we should, it's not the only problem, of course, but as a mother of very small children, I have this perspective of women that lose actually their status at workplace and socially and economically when they give birth, when they have children, especially little children. And there was a series of articles that we saw during the pandemic about women scholars that got to publish less during the pandemic, while men scholars got to publish more because they had the comfort of working from home, while the mothers had to take care of the children, the homeschooling, etc., etc. So what I think is important is to stress the importance of the sharing of the care, that the men should be the caregivers as well as women, and at the same time that we create a workplace that is good for women, that is helpful for women, that respects their agendas and respects their right to get equal pay and to be treated equally, we should also respect the necessity and stress the necessity of men being respected as caregivers, and to create an opportunity for them to actually care for their children. And this comes with a change of mindset of so many of us, because you see it, especially as parents who try to be equal, who try to share the care equally. Whenever we go to visit a pediatrician, the father is basically treated as thin air. He doesn't really exist in the conversation. So it's because the doctors, the people who work in the nurseries are so have this mindset that the women are there for the children, and they're the ones who are responsible and who know about their children's routines and what they need, right? So we need next to the equal pay, we need also shared pay leave for parental leave for women and for the fathers and the mothers equally. We can't sustain the system where you have like 12 months for the mother and then 2 weeks or 2 months for the father. It won't work. We have to share it equally from the beginning and just make them work at home as well as outside of the home. It won't work any other way.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think Iceland is one of the countries in Europe with the most generous paternity leave policies. It's 3 months, use it or lose it. So if the second parent doesn't use it in a couple, you lose 3 months of leave. And unsurprisingly, I think it's above 90% of fathers take 3 months of parental leave in the first year of a child's life, which is pretty transformative in terms of equal sharing of burden later on. Brilliant, thank you for that. One question we've had from the audience, and some of you have spoken about the need to renew democracy, is the role that citizens' assemblies could potentially play. Do any of you have kind of strong feelings, either for or against citizens' assemblies, and would like to say something? Ophélie, great, over to you.
I think as coming from France, I sort of have to say something about the Citizens' Assembly, especially since our government tried to implement it well, recently, before the crisis broke down here, when it came to environment, so there was this initiative from the French government to gather citizen assemblies to discuss environmental topic and what kind of rules we can try to put in place, and first of all, having this discussion. And second of all, having some policies issued by those assemblies, which sort of creates a different way of debating. Because I think what we lack, or part of the things we lack, because we lack quite a few of them, but is this ability to debate, and also this ability to empower people, to make them realize that you don't have to have all those years of college behind you to be able to have a say and to be able to have a strong opinion on something based on reasonable arguments. And so I think there are like a lot of things you can say about those assemblies, but I think that the principle in itself is good. And I think that it should not be considered as a direct alternative to democratic representation, and shouldn't be. There's a reason why we elect people, and they actually make them they make that like a proper job for a mandate. But we should also consider other ways of involving people into that, and I mean, I think it's important, and not only on national questions and the national agenda, also on European ones. And I think it would help a lot to give those tools to the people, because it would also make them understand the stakes, and they would actually feel including in the discussion. So I think it's one of the many tools we could try to reconnect with the people.
Great, thanks so much. Another question we've got from our audience is about what progressives have got wrong over the last decade, and what lessons you think there may be. Do any of you have views on that? What's the sort of one thing that you think the left across Europe has really messed up? Great, Richard?
I think first of all, the big problem is that the progressives, from my point of view, and also the left-wing parties, are good in analyzing situations, but not so good in acting in some cases. So we had, for example, in Germany, but also in Europe, I think, in the other Europe countries, we had so long discussions about who can govern with whom. It's possible to govern maybe in a progressive alliance between Social Democratic Party, the left-wing party, and the Greens, and we discussed it, and we discussed it, and we discussed it. And while we were discussing it, the chance to form such progressive governments became lower and lower. And right now, please correct me, in Germany, but also in many other European states, there's no possibility for progressive majorities anymore. I'm looking, to be honest, a bit. I'm looking a bit, or I'm looking interested to Spain and to Portuguese, how they manage it. So as a German social democrat, I'm happy that they govern there, and I'm every day very, very sad that my party and also the whole progressive and left-wing alliance and parties are so low. And I think the main point is that we somehow also didn't give the answers left and progressive parties had to give. I mean, my Social Democratic Party is since years in a grand coalition. So how should I explain people outside that I'm education in social democratic aims and values, while my party is governed the whole time with the conservatives? And that's not a problem of the conservatives, it's a problem for us. I think this is a problem many of our progressive partners all over Europe and maybe all over the world have right now. And I think sometimes we should try to face problems not with a light version of our party narratives, but with a strong version, with our ideas and real struggle about positions, and not only to think about in compromises and then compromise about the compromise. I think that's the problem of the progressive ones right now.
Thank you. Katharina.
I would like to add something. I think we're living in an uncertain world. It's globalization, it's digitalization. A lot of things are happening on many levels. And I think the progressive have to work more on explaining and showing how the future could also look like. I mean, the right wings, they have it easy. They're saying, let's go back, just put up the walls again, and then everything will be fine, which we know it will not. But what is our story, how a life could also look like? So I think we should work more on showing how our society could look like if we're living more sustainable, if we're working for social justice, if you're working for a democratic European, to give people an idea of how wonderful the life would look like. And maybe somebody's now thinking, well, will that help? I can just talk about my experience in Bavaria. We as a Green Party, we were always under 10%, always, like the last years, the last election. And the last Bavarian state election, 2018, we got 17.6%. So we're now the second strongest party. That's really good, I think. And we tried also the years before, not only talking about what we don't like about the others and what the government is doing not right and what we're not liking, and there is a problem and we know everything. No, here's a problem and there's something. But we made our story about how a green Bavaria would look like, how a Bavaria where a man and women have the equal rights and opportunity would look like, how a Bavaria who is friendly and working European and then is helping refugee can look like, and what we can offer them. And I as I said, just my personal experience, many people thought that is really, really interesting and is also an idea where we can walk to. And I think talking more about vision is always such a big word, but vision and aim and making a story about our society can look like if we are more sustainable, if we are more social just, and if we are more European. This maybe can give some of the people an idea that the future could also look different.
Thanks so much. So we're going to come to a last question now and hopefully get a couple of contributions from you on it. Just to bring this back to, this is really about the next generation. And I mentioned before that it really looks like the worst long-term impact of this pandemic is going to be on this generation of children and young people. So children who've seen schools closed for 5 months, that's going to lead to a bigger attainment gap between children from more affluent backgrounds and poorer backgrounds. We've got young people going to university in the UK, they pay, high fees. But, it looks like next year, certainly the first term, maybe more, it's all going to be socially distanced learning, a lot of remote learning. Young people who are going into the labour market, either straight from school or after university, are going into a labour market, which is looking very, very tough. And that's going to have long-term impacts. So I would like to ask you, do you have sort of concrete ideas for things that we can do to make this better for this generation of children and young people? Who would like to answer that? Anyone? Someone must have thoughts on this.
We can. I try to start.
Yeah, Richard will come to you first, and then we'll go to Magdalena. Yeah. Well, Richard, then Magdalena.
I think we need, as you talked about it, in education we need fee-free education. I know it sounds like an old hat, but it's also a very, very long progressive aim or goal, and we didn't achieve it. And I think the younger generations shouldn't come in the situation that they have to pay for the crisis and for the crises before, because every time we have crises, also with the financial crisis, it was almost the same. We had to the argument was to strengthen the economy and to strengthen the whole situation. We have less money for the social sector, and of course subventions for education, from my point of view, are belonging to this. So first of all, fee-free education, and then it's, as you said, it's a futures or future leader debate. As I read the invitation of this panel, I had to laugh a bit, because I'm now 35. I think younger generation, maybe you had the chance to name me like this 10 years before, and I think that's one of the biggest problems we have to face also in the parties. Within the parties, we need also strong young voices. And I have seen so many talents, visionaries, give the people who went away from the parties because the old structures, they had so good ideas, and the old structures weren't, I don't know, for them to. And I think that's a really big problem, because also those who are older, are older now. Also, those guys, most of them were young, and also the young and restless in their generation. And sometimes I see the fear of I would call them sometimes old dogs, or the male, white-haired old guys who are afraid of the young people coming into parties. And when we don't achieve this mind change within the parties, that also the younger generation has a right to get in place and to change things. We don't have to discuss all the things we had to discuss today, because then we will all fail. And that's my message to my party, but also to the other parties, because we shouldn't lose those talented people. And I also want to look in the future, where someone sometimes says to me, okay, you are too old to make politics now. We are the younger and fresher generation. Let's start over.
Great. Thanks so much, Richard. And Magdalena, I'm going to come over to you for the last word on this.
Yeah, it's a really tough question, because it really, I very strongly agree with what Richard said, because I think that we can't build the future for the young people without them. We have to listen to them. We have to listen to their voices. We have to allow them in, but also go out to them wherever they are and listen to them. And we talked about the citizen assemblies. We have to find ways to make that voice of citizens, and specifically young citizens, heard and specifically heard by the politicians. But I was also thinking about the problem that we have with people that with the social distancing, and how the coronavirus can affect the young people and the children. And we have a big problem right now in Poland. I don't know how it works in other countries, but the kindergartens and the nurseries have been opened, but because of the social distancing, they can't let in all the children that they were having before the pandemic. So right now, around 50% of the children are out of preschool and out of nurseries, while the other ones are there in the system. So what I was thinking is that maybe we should try to decentralize those public services that are aimed to that are for the children and the young people, that are not so mass let's say oriented. There is a huge how do you say I like the words right now. There is a strategy in the European Union towards the institutionalization of the people for homes for elderly, for the institutions that are the care institutions. But maybe we should think about how to decentralize and how to deinstitutionalize and root more in the communities all the institutions that are created for the children and for the pupils and for the young ones. Maybe we should try to invest in the communities so they can find more services and more support in their basic community, in their neighborhood, instead of the big institutions. But that's just my take on how we have to how we have to deal with the challenge of social distancing and the problem of separating people. Because I don't think that that putting them at homes separately and making them work on Zoom with their friends is the solution. We are dealing with a lot of depressions right now, and we can't be just putting them through that for another year or so. I don't think that's a good idea.
Thank you so much. I think you make a very, very good point there. So all that remains for me to say is a huge thank you to our four speakers, to Magdalena, to Richard, to Ophélie, and to Katharina. I think you'll agree that we had a really interesting debate that drew on the context from, France, Germany, and Poland. So it's really fantastic to have all your international experience on the panel and your ideas. So a big thank you to the four of you. Thank you to Progressive Zentrum, who have hosted us this evening and brought us all together. So that is much appreciated. And finally, a huge thank you to all of you who have joined us this evening, who submitted excellent questions and who have really contributed to the debate that way. It's very much appreciated. So thank you to all of you, and I hope you have a good evening and continue to enjoy this virtual conference. Bye-bye.